I discovered that my fiancé was my mother's first love during the wedding party. Welcome to the channel. Enjoy the video. Give it a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, comment and share. The glittering chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom cast a golden glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Olivia Hartley stood at the entrance, her heart racing beneath her Vera Wang wedding dress. She watched as New York's elite mingled, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the soft clink of champagne flutes. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but a gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach told her something wasn't right. Just 24 hours ago, everything had seemed perfect. Olivia, a 25-year-old former art student, was about to marry Richard Blackwood, the 50-year-old CEO of Blackwood Enterprises and one of the wealthiest men in America. Their whirlwind romance had been the talk of Manhattan's high society for months. Now, as she scanned the room filled with millionaires and billionaires, Olivia couldn't shake the memory of what she had overheard at last night's rehearsal dinner. She had been adjusting her makeup in the powder room when she heard her mother's voice, hushed but unmistakable, coming from around the corner. "Richard, we can't keep this secret any longer. It's eating me alive." Olivia froze, her lipstick hovering inches from her mouth. Richard's deep voice replied, "Sarah, we agreed. The past is in the past. What matters now is Olivia's future. Our future. But she deserves to know the truth," Sarah had pleaded. "The truth," Richard's tone turned sharp. "The truth is that your daughter is about to become Mrs. Blackwood, with access to a fortune beyond her wildest dreams. Don't jeopardize that now." The conversation had ended abruptly, leaving Olivia reeling. What secret could her mother and fiancé possibly share? And why did it feel like her entire world was built on a foundation of lies? Now, as the wedding guests arrived in their luxury cars and private limousines, Olivia felt like an actress in a play she hadn't rehearsed. She plastered on a smile as Richard approached, looking dashing in his custom Armani suit. "There's my beautiful bride," he said, planting a kiss on her cheek. "Are you ready to become Mrs. Blackwood?" Olivia nodded, unable to trust her voice. She watched as Richard moved effortlessly through the crowd, shaking hands and making small talk. To the outside world, he was the picture of success, a self-made man who had turned a small inheritance into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Blackwood Enterprises had its fingers in every pie, from real estate to technology. But now, Olivia wondered what dark secrets lurked beneath that polished exterior. "Olive," a familiar voice cut through her thoughts. Michael Thompson, Richard's best friend and COO of Blackwood Enterprises, approached with a grin. At 35, Michael was the youngest executive in the company, known for his sharp mind and even sharper suits. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Pre-wedding jitters." Olivia forced a laugh. "Something like that. Michael, can I talk to you for a second? In private." Concern flashed across Michael's face, but he nodded, guiding her to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "What's going on, Olive? You're not getting cold feet, are you?" She took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. "Michael, you've known Richard for years. Has he ever mentioned anything about my mother? Anything from before he met me?" Michael's brow furrowed. "Your mother? No, I don't think so. Why do you ask?" Olivia bit her lip, unsure how much to reveal. "I overheard something last night, a conversation between Richard and my mom. It sounded like they were hiding something big." Michael's expression turned serious. "Olive, listen to me. Richard is a complicated man with a past full of, let's call them, intricate business dealings. But I've never known him to be anything but devoted to you. Whatever you think you heard, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." But Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. As she glanced around the opulent ballroom, she realized that despite being surrounded by wealth and luxury, she had never felt more alone. The wedding ceremony was set to begin in less than an hour. Guests were already taking their seats, admiring the elaborate floral arrangements that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Olivia excused herself, needing a moment alone to collect her thoughts. She slipped into a side room, her wedding dress rustling softly against the plush carpet. As she closed the door behind her, a voice made her jump. "I was wondering when you'd come looking for answers." Olivia spun around to find her mother, Sarah, sitting in a velvet armchair. Sarah Hartley looked every inch the mother of the bride in her designer gown, but her eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of love and guilt. "Mom," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on? What are you and Richard hiding from me?" Sarah stood, wringing her hands. "Oh, sweetheart, I never wanted it to come to this, not on your wedding day. Please, Mom, just tell me the truth." Sarah took a deep breath. "Olivia, there's something you need to know about Richard, about our past. You see, many years ago, before you were born, Richard and I..." But before Sarah could finish her sentence, the door burst open. Richard stood there, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Sarah, I thought we agreed this wasn't the time or place." Olivia looked between her mother and her fiancé, feeling like a child caught in the middle of a bitter divorce. "Richard, what is going on? What aren't you telling me?" Richard's expression softened as he turned to Olivia. "My dear, every family has its secrets. But today isn't about the past. It's about our future together. A future filled with love, success, and all the riches this world has to offer." As he spoke, Olivia couldn't help but notice how his words seemed carefully chosen, like a skilled politician evading a difficult question. She opened her mouth to protest, but a knock at the door interrupted them. "15 minutes until the ceremony, Miss Hartley," a coordinator's voice called out. Richard smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "We should get ready. Sarah, why don't you help Olivia with her final touches? I'll see you both at the altar." As Richard left, Olivia turned to her mother, desperate for answers, but Sarah just shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I wish things could be different." Olivia felt like she was drowning in a sea of unanswered questions. As she allowed her mother to adjust her veil, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. The wedding march began to play, its joyful notes a stark contrast to the turmoil in Olivia's heart. As she prepared to walk down the aisle, she caught sight of herself in a full-length mirror. The woman staring back at her looked every bit the blushing bride, but her eyes told a different story, one of confusion, fear, and a desperate need for the truth. With each step toward the altar, Olivia felt like she was walking into a beautiful trap. The faces of the guests blurred as she passed, their smiles and whispers of admiration fading into background noise. All she could focus on was Richard, waiting for her at the end of the aisle, his million-dollar smile betraying nothing of the secrets he held. As she reached him and he took her hand, Olivia made a silent vow to herself. She would say, "I do" today, but this was far from over. Whatever secret lay buried in her family's past, whatever web of lies and half-truths had been spun, she would unravel it all, because in this world of wealth and power, the most valuable currency was the truth, and Olivia Hartley was determined to be rich in more than just money. The ceremony began, but Olivia's mind was elsewhere. As the priest spoke of love and commitment, she found herself planning her next move. She would need allies, resources, and most importantly, information. And she knew just where to start. Michael Thompson, the one person close to Richard who might be willing to help her uncover the truth. As she exchanged rings with Richard, feeling the weight of the multi-million-dollar diamond on her finger, Olivia realized that her journey was just beginning. The mystery surrounding her mother and Richard's past was like a ticking time bomb, and she was determined to defuse it before it exploded and destroyed everything she held dear. Little did Olivia know that across the ballroom, hidden among the guests, sat Jessica Reeves, a tenacious investigative journalist who had been tracking Richard Blackwood's activities for years. Jessica watched the ceremony with keen interest, her reporter's instinct telling her that there was more to this fairy tale wedding than met the eye. She had no idea that her path would soon intertwine with Olivia's in a dance of secrets, lies, and earth-shattering revelations. As the newlyweds shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. But beneath the surface of this picture-perfect moment, a storm was brewing, one that would shake the foundations of the Blackwood Empire and change Olivia's life forever. The reception was in full swing. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel transformed into a glittering wonderland of wealth and excess. Crystal centerpieces caught the light, casting prismatic reflections across tables laden with fine china and sterling silver cutlery. The air was thick with the scent of rare orchids and the subtle aroma of gourmet dishes prepared by world-renowned chefs. Olivia sat at the head table, her smile fixed in place as she accepted congratulations from a parade of New York's elite. Senators, CEOs, and celebrities all clamored for a moment with the new Mrs. Blackwood, their words of blessing thinly veiling their desire to curry favor with Richard's empire. "You've certainly married into quite the fortune." "Some idea," cooed Evelyn Astor, wife of a prominent real estate mogul. "The Blackwood name opens doors you couldn't imagine." Olivia nodded politely, all too aware of the weight of expectations now resting on her shoulders. She glanced at Richard, who was deep in conversation with a group of men in expensive suits, no doubt discussing some multi-million-dollar deal. The champagne in her glass bubbled endlessly, a metaphor for the questions fizzing in her mind. As the evening wore on, Olivia found herself increasingly restless. The opulence surrounding her felt suffocating, a gilded cage trapping her in a life she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. She excused herself from the table, needing a moment of respite from the constant scrutiny. In a quiet hallway outside the ballroom, Olivia leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and taking deep breaths. The cool air was a welcome relief from the stuffy atmosphere inside. "I penny for your thoughts." Olivia's eyes snapped open to see Michael Thompson standing before her, concern etched on his handsome face. "Michael," she sighed, "I don't even know where to begin." He glanced around to ensure they were alone. "Listen, Olive, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about Richard and your mum." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "There might be something to it. I've noticed some irregularities in the company's accounts lately. Nothing concrete, but enough to raise eyebrows." Olivia felt her heart rate quicken. "What kind of irregularities?" "Large sums of money being moved around, offshore accounts, that sort of thing. It could be nothing, but—" Michael trailed off, his implication clear. "We need to investigate this," Olivia said, her voice filled with determination. "Michael, will you help me?" Before he could respond, the click of heels on marble alerted them to someone's approach. They turned to see a striking woman in her early 40s, her keen eyes taking in the scene before her. "Mrs. Blackwood," the woman said, extending her hand. "Jessica Reeves, New York Times. I wonder if I might have a word." Olivia hesitated, glancing at Michael, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Of course, Ms. Reeves. What can I do for you?" Jessica's smile was predatory. "I'm working on a story about Blackwood Enterprises. Perhaps we could schedule an interview. I have some interesting questions about your husband's business practices." The implication in her tone was clear. This wasn't a simple puff piece about a society wedding. Jessica Reeves was after something big. "I'd be happy to discuss it," Olivia said carefully. "Why don't you give me your card and we can arrange something for next week?" As they exchanged contact information, Olivia's mind raced. Could this journalist be the key to unraveling the mystery surrounding Richard and her mother? The rest of the evening passed in a blur of toasts, dances, and forced smiles. As midnight approached, Richard announced it was time for them to depart for their honeymoon. 2 weeks in the Maldives at a private island resort that cost more per night than most people earned in a year. As they said their goodbyes, Olivia hugged her mother tightly. "This isn't over, Mom," she whispered. "We need to talk when I get back." Sarah nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Be careful, sweetheart. There's more at stake here than you know." The newlyweds departed in a shower of rose petals, climbing into a waiting Rolls-Royce. As they drove through the streets of Manhattan, Richard placed his hand on Olivia's knee. "I hope you're happy, my dear," he said, his voice soft but with an undercurrent of something Olivia couldn't quite place. "So you're part of the Blackwood family now. Everything I have is yours." Olivia forced a smile, even as her stomach churned with anxiety. "I'm thrilled, Richard, but you know, I was thinking maybe when we get back, I could take a more active role in the company. Learn the ropes, so to speak." Richard's grip on her knee tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, darling. We'll discuss it after the honeymoon. For now, let's focus on enjoying our time together." As they arrived at the private airstrip, where Richard's Gulfstream jet waited to whisk them away, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was flying into the eye of a storm. The honeymoon was a study in contrasts. By day, Olivia and Richard lounged on pristine beaches, swam in crystal-clear waters, and indulged in every luxury imaginable. By night, Olivia lay awake, her mind racing with questions and plans. She used every opportunity to gather information, casually bringing up the company in conversation. Watching Richard's reactions carefully, she noted how he skillfully deflected certain topics, his charm and wit a perfect smokescreen for whatever he was hiding. On their last night in paradise, as they dined on a private beach under a canopy of stars, Richard surprised her with a gift, a stunning diamond necklace that must have cost millions. "A token of my love," he said, fastening it around her neck, "and a reminder of the life we'll build together." Olivia touched the cold stones, feeling their weight like a collar. "It's beautiful, Richard. Thank you." As he kissed her, Olivia made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The diamonds around her neck weren't just a gift, they were a challenge, and Olivia Hartley was never one to back down from a challenge. Back in New York, Olivia wasted no time. She arranged a meeting with Jessica Reeves at a discreet cafe in the West Village, far from the prying eyes of Richard's social circle. "Mrs. Blackwood," Jessica greeted her, a notepad already open on the table. "I appreciate you meeting with me. Shall we get straight to business?" Olivia nodded, her heart pounding. "Before we start, I need to know, what exactly are you investigating?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Oh, let's just say I have reason to believe that Blackwood Enterprises isn't as squeaky clean as it appears. There are whispers of money laundering, insider trading, even connections to less than reputable overseas operations. But what I'm really interested in is your take on all this. You're an insider now, Mrs. Blackwood. What have you seen?" Olivia took a deep breath, weighing her options. This could be her chance to get to the bottom of everything, but it could also blow up in her face spectacularly. "Mr. Reeves," she said finally, "I think we might be able to help each other. But first, I need to know what you know about my mother's connection to Richard. There's a history there, something they're both hiding. If we can uncover that, I think it might be the key to everything else." Jessica leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of a potential scoop. "Now that, Mrs. Blackwood, is a story I'd very much like to hear." As they talked, piecing together fragments of information, Olivia felt a mix of excitement and dread. She was on the verge of uncovering a truth that could change everything: her marriage, her family, and possibly the entire financial landscape of New York. Little did she know that across town, in the penthouse office of Blackwood Enterprises, Richard was having a very different kind of meeting. Michael Thompson sat across from him, his usually confident demeanor replaced by nervous tension. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Richard's smile was cold as he pushed a folder across the desk. "Care to explain these discrepancies in our offshore accounts, Michael? It seems someone has been a little too curious for their own good." As Michael stammered an explanation, Richard's mind was elsewhere. He had underestimated Olivia, it seemed. She wasn't content to be a trophy wife, basking in the glow of his wealth and power. No, she was digging, and if she dug too deep, everything he had built could come crumbling down. Richard's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from one of his sources. A grainy photo attached showing Olivia and Jessica Reeves deep in conversation at the cafe. His jaw clenched as he looked out over the New York skyline, the city that had made him rich and powerful. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much gang to let it all fall apart now. "Michael," he said, cutting off the younger man's rambling excuses, "I think it's time we took care of our little problem permanently." As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the city, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the Blackwood Empire. Olivia, armed with newfound knowledge and determination, was on a collision course with the man she had married, a man who would stop at nothing to protect his secrets and his fortune. The truth was out there, buried beneath layers of lies and deceit, and as night fell on the city that never sleeps, the real game was about to begin. The following weeks were a delicate dance of deception for Olivia. By day, she played the role of the perfect society wife, attending charity galas and luncheons, her diamond-encrusted wrist a constant reminder of her new status. By night, she pored over financial documents and newspaper clippings, piecing together the puzzle of Richard's past and her mother's involvement. One crisp autumn morning, Olivia found herself in the marbled lobby of Blackwood Enterprises, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she made her way to the executive elevators. She had convinced Richard to let her shadow some of the company's operations, claiming a desire to understand his world better. In reality, it was her chance to dig deeper. As she stepped into Richard's opulent office on the top floor, she was struck by the view of Manhattan sprawling before her, a concrete jungle where dreams were made and broken every day. Richard greeted her with a kiss, his cologne a mixture of sandalwood and something darker, more dangerous. "Welcome to my kingdom, darling," he said, gesturing to the city below. "From up here, we rule it all." Olivia forced a smile, fighting the urge to shudder at his words. "It's impressive, Richard. I can't wait to learn more about how it all works." As Richard began explaining the intricacies of a new real estate development, Olivia's eyes wandered to a framed photo on his desk. It was an old picture, yellowed with age, showing a much younger Richard standing with a group of people she didn't recognize. All except one, her mother, Sarah, looking youthful and carefree, her arm linked with Richard's. "Richard?" Olivia interrupted, her heart racing. "This photo, when was it taken?" She saw a flicker of something, panic, anger, in Richard's eyes, before his smooth mask slipped back into place. "Oh, that old thing. Must be from 20 or 25 years ago. A company picnic, I believe. Your mother used to work for me. Did she never mention it?" The casual way he dismissed it only fueled Olivia's suspicions. "No, she never did. How interesting." Before she could press further, Richard's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Blackwood, your 11 o'clock is here." "Ah, yes. I'm sorry, darling, but duty calls. Why don't you take a tour of the building? Michael can show you around." As if on cue, Michael appeared at the door, his usual charming smile in place, though Olivia noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mrs. Blackwood," he greeted her formally. "Shall we?" As they walked through the gleaming corridors of Blackwood Enterprises, Olivia's mind was racing. She needed to find a way to talk to Michael alone, away from prying eyes and ears. Her opportunity came when they reached the company's state-of-the-art data center. As the IT manager droned on about server capacities and cybersecurity measures, Olivia feigned a headache. "Michael, would you mind if we took a short break? Perhaps some fresh air?" Concern flashed across Michael's face. "Of course, Olive. Let's head up to the rooftop garden." The rooftop was a lush oasis high above the city, complete with manicured lawns and a bubbling fountain that probably cost more than most people's homes. As they stood looking out over New York, Olivia decided it was time to lay her cards on the table. "Michael, I know something's not right here. The offshore accounts, the secretive meetings, the connection between Richard and my mother. I need your help to uncover the truth." Michael's shoulders sagged, as if a great weight had settled upon them. "Olive, you have no idea what you're getting into. Richard, he's not who you think he is. None of this is what it seems." "Then help me understand," Olivia pleaded. "What's really going on here?" Michael looked around nervously before lowering his voice. "It goes back years. Richard, your mother, a group of investors. They were involved in something big, something illegal. I don't know all the details, but I do know that people who ask too many questions tend to disappear." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine, despite the warm sun. "Are you saying Richard is dangerous?" "I'm saying be careful, Olive, for your own sake." Their conversation was cut short by the chime of the elevator. Richard stepped out onto the rooftop, his smile not quite masking the suspicion in his eyes. "Enjoying the view?" he asked, his tone deceptively light. "It's breathtaking," Olivia replied, forcing herself to sound casual. "Michael was just telling me about some of the company's green initiatives." Richard's gaze flickered between them, clearly not buying the excuse. "How fascinating. Michael, I believe you have a meeting to attend. Olivia, darling, why don't we have lunch? There's someone I'd like you to meet." As Michael hurried away, casting one last worried glance at Olivia, she felt like a pawn in a game where she didn't know all the rules. But she was determined to keep playing until she uncovered the truth. Lunch turned out to be at Le Bernardin, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. As they were led to a private dining room, Olivia noticed a woman already seated at the table. She was in her 60s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything. "Olivia, I'd like you to meet Eleanor Blackwood, my mother," Richard announced. Olivia's surprise must have shown on her face because Eleanor chuckled. "Ah, I see my son hasn't mentioned me before. How typical." As they sat down, Olivia felt like she was walking into a lion's den. Eleanor Blackwood exuded power and authority, her gaze penetrating as she studied her new daughter-in-law. "So, My dear, Eleanor began as the waiter poured vintage champagne into crystal flutes. I hear you've been taking quite an interest in the family business. How enterprising of you. The way she said it made it clear that she didn't approve. Olivia took a sip of champagne to steady her nerves. I just want to understand Richard's world better. Is that so wrong? Eleanor's laugh was like ice cracking. Oh, you naive child. You have no idea what you've married into, do you? The Blackwood name comes with responsibilities, expectations, and secrets. Richard cleared his throat, a warning in his eyes as he looked at his mother. I'm sure Olivia understands that discretion is paramount in our circles, Mother. The tension at the table was palpable. Olivia felt like she was watching a chess match where she couldn't see all the pieces. Perhaps, she ventured, someone could explain exactly what these secrets and responsibilities entail. Eleanor's eyes glittered dangerously. My dear, some questions are better left unasked, for everyone's sake. As the meal progressed, the conversation turned to safer topics: charity galas, upcoming social events, the latest gossip in their elite circle. But Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just been given a veiled threat. Later that evening, as Olivia prepared for bed in the penthouse she shared with Richard, her mind was whirling with questions. She slipped on a silk nightgown worth more than her old apartment's rent, the luxury that surrounded her now feeling more like a prison than a dream come true. She was startled by a knock at the bedroom door. Opening it, she found one of the household staff holding a small package. This was just delivered for you, Mrs. Blackwood, the maid said, handing over a plain brown envelope. Olivia's heart raced as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph and a note. The photo showed her mother, Sarah, standing with Richard and several other men she didn't recognize. They were all much younger, and the setting looked tropical, perhaps the Caribbean. The note, typed on plain paper, read simply, "The truth lies in St. Lucia, July 15th, 1999. As Olivia stared at the photograph, her hands shaking, she heard Richard's footsteps approaching. Quickly, she hid the envelope in her bedside drawer just as he entered the room. Everything all right, darling? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Of course, Olivia lied smoothly, forcing a smile. Just a bit tired from our lunch with your mother. She's quite formidable. Richard chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. That she is. I hope she didn't scare you off. As they prepared for bed, Olivia's mind was racing. St. Lucia, July 15th, 1999. What had happened there? And who had sent her this cryptic message? She knew one thing for certain: she was getting closer to the truth. But as she lay beside Richard, listening to his steady breathing, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was also getting closer to danger. The next morning, Olivia made a decision. She needed to find out what happened in St. Lucia. And there was only one person who could give her answers: her mother. As dawn broke over the city, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers, Olivia slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Richard. She had a lot of work to do, and time was running out. Whatever secrets lay buried in the past, she was determined to unearth them, no matter the cost. Little did she know that her every move was being watched, and that her quest for the truth was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the Blackwood Empire and change her life forever. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Manhattan as Olivia's taxi wound its way through the city. She had left a note for Richard, claiming a last-minute brunch with old college friends. In reality, she was headed to her mother's modest apartment in Queens, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. As she climbed the stairs to her childhood home, the contrast between her current life of luxury and her humble beginnings struck her forcefully. The worn carpet and peeling wallpaper were a far cry from the marble floors and priceless art of the Blackwood penthouse. Sarah Hartley opened the door, surprise etched on her face. "Olivia, what are you doing here so early?" Olivia pushed past her mother into the small living room, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "We need to talk, Mom, about Richard, about the past, about everything you've been hiding from me." Sarah's face paled. She sank onto the worn sofa, suddenly looking every one of her 55 years. "I was afraid this day would come," she whispered. Olivia pulled out the photograph she had received, laying it on the coffee table between them. St. Lucia, 1999. "What happened there, Mom? And don't lie to me." "Not anymore." Sarah stared at the photo, her hands trembling as she picked it up. Oh, Olivia, you have no idea what you're getting into. This could destroy everything. I don't care, Olivia exclaimed, her frustration boiling over. I'm tired of the secrets, the lies. I need to know the truth. Please, Mom. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving the photograph. It was supposed to be the deal of a lifetime. Richard had gathered a group of investors for a massive resort development in St. Lucia. Your father and I, we put everything we had into it. Our life savings, our future. Olivia leaned forward, hanging on every word. And it was all a scam, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Richard and his partners, they cooked the books, inflated the projections. When it all came crashing down, they walked away rich. And the rest of us, we lost everything. Olivia felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. But if Richard ruined you, why did you let me marry him? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Because he threatened us, Olivia. He said if we ever spoke a word of what happened, he'd make sure we ended up in prison. And then, when he met you years later and didn't realize the connection, I thought maybe it was a chance for you to have the life you deserved. Olivia's mind was reeling. The man she had married, the empire she had become a part of, it was all built on fraud and threats. Does Richard know who I really am? That you're my mother? Sarah shook her head. No, I don't think so. I changed my name after your father died. Richard never knew we had a daughter. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but Olivia knew there was still more to uncover. Mom, I need to know everything. Every detail. Every player involved. If I'm going to expose this, I need the full story. For the next few hours, Sarah poured out the whole sordid tale. The initial meetings in luxurious Caribbean resorts, the falsified documents, the offshore accounts where millions disappeared. Olivia took frantic notes, her journalist's instincts kicking in as she pieced together the complex web of deceit. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Olivia's phone buzzed incessantly, texts and missed calls from Richard, each one more insistent than the last. She knew she couldn't ignore him much longer without raising suspicion. Mom, I have to go, Olivia said, gathering her things. But this isn't over. I'm going to make this right. Somehow. Sarah grabbed her arm, fear evident in her eyes. Be careful, Olivia. Richard is more dangerous than you know. He won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens his empire. As Olivia hurried back to Manhattan, her mind was whirling with plans and possibilities. She needed proof, hard evidence that would stand up in court, and for that she needed an ally. Back at the Blackwood penthouse, Olivia found Richard waiting, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been trying to reach you all morning." Olivia forced herself to remain calm, to play the role of the ditzy socialite wife. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. Brunch with the girls ran long, and you know how poor the cell reception is at that little cafe we love." She could see the suspicion in Richard's eyes, but he seemed to accept her explanation, if reluctantly. "Well, you're just in time. We have the charity gala at the Met tonight, remember? Your dress is laid out in the bedroom." As Olivia prepared for the gala, donning a couture gown that cost more than a year's rent in her old apartment, she couldn't help but feel like she was suiting up for battle. Every glittering jewel, every perfectly coiffed hair, was part of her armor in this high-stakes game of deception. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed for the evening, its grand halls filled with New York's elite. As Olivia circulated through the crowd on Richard's arm, she scanned the room for familiar faces. She needed to find Michael Thompson to see if he would be willing to help her uncover the truth. She spotted him near the Egyptian exhibit, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Excusing herself from Richard's side, Olivia made her way over to Michael. "We need to talk," she whispered urgently. "Not here. Meet me in the Greek and Roman sculpture gallery in 10 minutes. Michael's eyes widened, but he gave a slight nod of understanding. 10 minutes later, surrounded by ancient marbles and the distant murmur of the party, Olivia and Michael huddled in a quiet corner. "I know about St. Lucia," Olivia said without preamble. "I know what Richard did, how he scammed those investors. Michael, I need your help to expose him." Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking torn. "Olive, you don't understand. It's not just Richard. This goes all the way to the top. Politicians, judges, even some law enforcement. The whole system is corrupt." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. "Then we need to bring it all down. but I can't do it alone. Will you help me?" Before Michael could answer, a shadow fell over them. They turned to find Jessica Reeves, the investigative journalist, standing there with a knowing smile. "I couldn't help but overhear," Jessica said quietly. "And I think I might be able to offer some assistance in your little crusade." Olivia's heart raced. This was it, the team she needed to unravel the Blackwood Empire's web of lies. But as she looked between Michael and Jessica, she realized the enormity of what she was undertaking. She was declaring war on one of the most powerful men in New York, a man who happened to be her husband. As they quickly exchanged contact information and agreed to meet the next day, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a point of no return. The glittering party continued around them, a stark reminder of the world of wealth and privilege she was risking everything to expose. Rejoining Richard, Olivia plastered on her most dazzling smile. She laughed at his jokes, charmed his business associates, played the perfect wife. But inside, her mind was racing, planning her next moves in this high-stakes game of cat and mouse. As the night wore on, Olivia found herself on the museum's rooftop garden, ostensibly getting some air. The New York skyline glittered before her, a testament to the power and money concentrated in this small island. She thought about all the lives affected by the greed and corruption of men like Richard, about her own father, who had lost everything. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Blackwood." Olivia turned to find Eleanor Blackwood beside her, a champagne flute in her perfectly manicured hand. "Just admiring the view," Olivia lied smoothly. Eleanor's laugh was cold. "My dear, I wasn't born yesterday. I see the wheels turning behind those pretty eyes of yours. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you know, tread carefully. The Blackwood name has weathered many storms, and we always come out on top." As Eleanor glided away, her warning hanging in the air, Olivia felt a renewed sense of determination. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The game was on, and she was playing for keeps. Little did Olivia know that across the city, in a dimly lit office, Richard Blackwood was having a very different kind of meeting. Surveillance photos of Olivia visiting her mother's apartment were spread across his desk. His eyes were cold, his voice deadly calm as he spoke into the phone. "Find out everything. And I mean everything. If my wife is who I think she is, well, let's just say the honeymoon is officially over." As the gala wound down and the elite of New York dispersed into the night, the pieces were set for a showdown that would shake the very foundations of the city's power structure. Olivia Hartley Blackwood, armed with the truth and a burning desire for justice, was on a collision course with the dark heart of her husband's empire. The stakes were life and death, and the clock was ticking. The following morning dawned grey and overcast, matching Olivia's mood as she prepared for her clandestine meeting with Michael and Jessica. She had told Richard she was going for a spa day, knowing he would be tied up in meetings at Blackwood Enterprises. As she slipped on a pair of oversized sunglasses and hailed a taxi, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The meeting place was a nondescript coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the prying eyes of Manhattan's elite. Olivia found Michael and Jessica already waiting in a corner booth, heads bent together in hushed conversation. "Glad you could make it," Jessica said, sliding a cup of coffee towards Olivia. "We've got a lot to discuss." For the next 2 hours, the trio pored over documents, connected dots, and formulated a plan. Jessica had been investigating Blackwood Enterprises for months and had uncovered a trail of shell companies, suspicious transactions, and political payoffs that made Olivia's head spin. The St. Lucia deal was just the tip of the iceberg, Jessica explained, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of a big story. "We're talking about decades of fraud, money laundering, and God knows what else." Michael nodded grimly. "I've been funneling documents to Jessica for weeks. Financial records, emails, meeting minutes, anything I could get my hands on without raising suspicion." Olivia felt a mix of admiration and fear for her new allies. "So, what's our next move?" Jessica leaned forward, her voice low. "We need concrete proof of Richard's direct involvement, something that ties him personally to these illegal activities. Without that, he'll just claim plausible deniability and throw some lower-level executives under the bus." "I might have an idea," Olivia said slowly. "Richard has a private study in our penthouse. He spends hours in there alone, and it's always locked. If there's evidence to be found, it'll be in there." Michael looked alarmed. "Olive, that's incredibly dangerous." If Richard catches you, he won't, Olivia said, with more confidence than she felt. I'll wait for the right moment. In the meantime, we need to keep digging. Jessica, can you look into any connections between Richard and law enforcement? And Michael, we need more recent financial records. As they finalized their plans, Olivia felt a strange mix of exhilaration and terror. She was in so deep now there was no turning back. Returning to the penthouse, Olivia found Richard waiting for her, a glass of scotch in his hand, despite the early hour. "How was the spa, darling?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Divine," Olivia lied smoothly. "You really must join me next time. The mud baths are to die for." Richard's laugh didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps I will. Oh, I almost forgot. Mother has invited us for dinner tonight. Some sort of family emergency she wants to discuss." Olivia's heart raced. Had Eleanor discovered something? Was this a trap? But she merely smiled and said, "Of course, dear. I'll wear the new Chanel." As she prepared for dinner, Olivia's mind whirled with possibilities. She needed to find a way into Richard's study, and soon. Time was running out. The Blackwood family estate was a sprawling mansion in the Hamptons, all manicured lawns and imposing columns. As their Bentley pulled up the circular driveway, Olivia felt like she was entering the lion's den. Eleanor Blackwood greeted them in the grand foyer, every inch the matriarch in her Hermes scarf and perfectly coiffed silver hair. "Richard, Olivia, so glad you could come on such short notice." Dinner was a tense affair, the clinking of fine china and crystal the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Finally, as the dessert plates were cleared, Eleanor spoke. "I suppose you're wondering why I called this little family meeting," she said, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. "It seems we have a problem. Someone has been asking questions, digging into things best left buried." Olivia felt her blood run cold. Under the table, her hands clenched into fists, the diamond on her wedding ring cutting into her palm. Richard leaned forward, his face a mask of concern. "What kind of questions, Mother?" Eleanor's lips thinned. "Questions about St. Lucia, about certain financial arrangements from years ago. I've had my sources look into it, and it seems the inquiries are coming from multiple fronts. A journalist, someone within the company, and," her gaze swiveled to Olivia, "someone much closer to home." The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia could hear her own heart pounding in her ears. She forced herself to meet Eleanor's gaze, praying her face betrayed nothing. Richard's voice was dangerously soft when he spoke. "Olivia, darling, you wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you?" She summoned every ounce of her acting skills, widening her eyes in innocent confusion. "I'm afraid I don't understand. What's St. Lucia? And what financial arrangements?" Eleanor's laugh was cold and brittle. "Oh, my dear, playing dumb doesn't suit you. We know about your little meeting in Brooklyn today. Did you really think we wouldn't be watching?" Olivia's mind raced. They knew. Somehow, they knew everything, but she couldn't give up now. She had come too far. "If you know so much," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "then you know I'm close to exposing everything. The fraud, the money laundering, all of it." Richard stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I think it's time we took this discussion somewhere more private. Olivia, come with me." As Richard led her down a long hallway, Olivia's survival instincts kicked in. She needed to find a way out, to warn Michael and Jessica. But as they entered a dimly lit study, she realized with a sinking heart that she might already be too late. Michael Thompson was there, looking pale and defeated. Next to him stood two men in dark suits. Private security, Olivia guessed, or maybe something worse. "I'm so sorry, Olive," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They got to me. Threatened my family. I had no choice." Richard's grip on Olivia's arm tightened painfully. "You see, my dear wife, loyalty is everything in this family, and those who betray that loyalty, well, they tend to regret it." Olivia's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. She thought of the evidence they had gathered, safely hidden away. She thought of Jessica, who was probably still digging, unaware of what had transpired. And she thought of her mother, who had warned her about the dangers of crossing Richard Blackwood. But as she looked into Richard's cold and calculating eyes, Olivia realized that this was far from over. She had underestimated her opponent, but she wasn't beaten yet, not by a long shot. "You're right, Richard," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Loyalty is everything, and you're about to learn just how loyal I can be to the truth." With that, Olivia made a split-second decision. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a heavy paperweight from the desk and smashed it against the window. The sound of shattering glass filled the room as chaos erupted. Olivia dove through the broken window, ignoring the cuts and scrapes as she rolled onto the manicured lawn. She could hear shouts and footsteps behind her, but she didn't look back. She ran into the darkness of the Hamptons night, her designer dress in tatters, her mind focused on one thing: survival. As she disappeared into the shadows, Olivia knew that her life would never be the same. The glittering world of wealth and privilege she had married into was revealed for what it truly was: a gilded cage built on lies and corruption. But she had something now that Richard and his empire of greed didn't: the truth. And as the stars twinkled overhead, indifferent to the drama unfolding below, Olivia Hartley Blackwood made a vow. She would bring down the house of cards that Richard had built, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and now she was playing for keeps. Little did she know that her escape was just the beginning of a cat-and-mouse chase that would span continents, test loyalties, and push her to her very limits. The truth about St. Lucia and the Blackwood Empire was a ticking time bomb, and Olivia was holding the detonator. As dawn broke over the Hamptons, casting a rosy glow over the mansions of the ultra-wealthy, Olivia found herself at a crossroads. She had no money, no allies she could trust, and a powerful enemy who would stop at nothing to silence her. But she had something far more valuable: the burning desire for justice and the knowledge that could bring down an empire. With one last look at the world she was leaving behind, Olivia set off into the unknown, ready to fight for the truth, no matter where it might lead her. The next 48 hours were a blur of adrenaline and desperation for Olivia. Using cash she had managed to withdraw before her accounts were inevitably frozen, she made her way back to the city, staying off the grid and constantly looking over her shoulder. Her once perfect manicure was chipped, her designer clothes exchanged for nondescript thrift store finds. She was a far cry from the polished socialite she had been just days ago. Her first stop was her mother's apartment in Queens. Sarah Hartley opened the door, her face etched with worry. "Olivia! Thank God! I've been watching the news. They're saying you've gone missing." Olivia pushed past her mother into the small living room. "Mom, I don't have much time. I need your help. Everything you told me about St. Lucia, about Richard, I need proof. Anything you might have kept from back then." Sarah's face paled. "Olivia, you don't know what you're asking. Those documents, they could destroy lives." "Lives have already been destroyed, Mom," Olivia said, her voice hard. "It's time for the truth to come out." After a moment's hesitation, Sarah nodded. She disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a dusty shoebox. "I kept these all these years, just in case. Bank statements, contracts, even some photographs. I pray you know what you're doing, sweetheart." Olivia hugged her mother fiercely. "Thank you. Now listen carefully. I need you to go stay with Aunt Linda in New Jersey. Don't tell anyone where you're going, not even me. It's safer that way." As Sarah packed a quick bag, Olivia's burner phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, 1 hour." It had to be Jessica. The rendezvous at the park was tense, both women scanning the area for any sign of Richard's men. Jessica looked haggard, her usual professional demeanor cracked by stress. "I've been working non-stop since your escape," Jessica said, handing Olivia a USB drive. "Everything I've uncovered about Blackwood Enterprises is on here. Financial records, emails, even some recorded conversations. It's dynamite." Olivia clutched the drive like a lifeline. "What about Michael? Have you heard from him?" Jessica shook her head grimly. "Nothing, but my sources say he's alive, probably being held somewhere for questioning. We need to move fast if we want to save him and bring down Richard." Their planning session was cut short by the distant wail of police sirens. Whether they were coming for her or not, Olivia couldn't take the chance. She and Jessica quickly parted ways, agreeing on a secure method of communication. Over the next week, Olivia became a ghost, moving between safe houses and using her dwindling resources to stay ahead of Richard's pursuit. She pored over the documents from her mother and the files from Jessica, slowly piecing together the full extent of the Blackwood Empire's corruption. It went beyond just financial fraud. There were bribes to government officials, blackmail of judges, even ties to organized crime. The St. Lucia deal was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a decades-long scheme that had made the Blackwoods one of the most powerful families in America. But Olivia knew that evidence alone wouldn't be enough. She needed a platform, a way to make sure the truth couldn't be buried or spun. That's when inspiration struck. Using an encrypted connection, Olivia reached out to an old college friend who now worked at a major news network. Within hours, she had secured a primetime interview slot, a chance to tell her story to the world. The night of the interview, Olivia sat in the green room, her heart pounding. She was risking everything on this gambit. If it failed, she would have nowhere left to run. As the cameras started rolling, Olivia took a deep breath and began to speak. "Good evening, America. My name is Olivia Hartley Blackwood, and I'm here to tell you the truth about one of the most powerful families in this country." For the next hour, Olivia laid out the entire sordid tale. The fraud, the corruption, the lives destroyed. She presented document after document, corroborating every claim with hard evidence. As she spoke, her phone buzzed constantly with messages and notifications. The story was going viral. Halfway through the interview, breaking news interrupted the broadcast. FBI agents were raiding Blackwood Enterprises offices across the country. Richard Blackwood had been taken into custody, along with several high-ranking executives and even a few politicians. As the interview concluded, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had done it. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back in the box. The aftermath was a whirlwind: grand jury indictments, congressional hearings, a complete overhaul of financial regulations. The Blackwood empire crumbled, its vast wealth seized and redistributed to the victims of their schemes. Michael Thompson, who had been held in a private detention facility, was rescued and turned state's witness, providing even more damning evidence against Richard and his co-conspirators. Months later, Olivia stood outside the federal courthouse, watching as Richard Blackwood was led away in handcuffs after his sentencing. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Olivia saw something she had never seen before in her ex-husband's gaze: defeat. As the media clamored for a statement, Olivia stepped up to the microphones. "Today, justice has been served, but our work is far from over. The corruption that allowed men like Richard Blackwood to prosper for so long still exists in our system. It's up to all of us to remain vigilant, to demand transparency, and to hold those in power accountable." In the years that followed, Olivia became a crusader for financial reform and corporate accountability. She used her share of the recovered Blackwood assets to start a foundation dedicated to helping victims of white-collar crime rebuild their lives. She also reconnected with her roots, using her platform to advocate for arts education, a reminder of the passionate young artist she had once been before being swept into Richard's world. On a warm summer evening, 5 years after the fateful night she had fled the Blackwood estate, Olivia found herself back in that small Queens apartment where it had all begun. Her mother, Sarah, was hosting a small dinner party to celebrate Olivia's recent engagement to Michael Thompson, of all people. As Olivia looked around the modest living room, filled with the people she loved most in the world, she realized something profound. The true measure of wealth wasn't in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It was in the connections we forge, the truths we uphold, and the lives we touch. She raised her glass, a simple wine in a non-crystal goblet, and made a toast to second chances, to the power of truth, and to the real riches in life: love, integrity, and justice. As the small group clinked their glasses together, Olivia felt a sense of peace wash over her. The nightmare was over. The truth had won out, and though the path had been fraught with danger and sacrifice, she knew she would do it all again in a heartbeat. Because in the end, the greatest fortune of all was the ability to look in the mirror and be proud of the person staring back. And that was something no amount of money could ever buy.